We left off, I think we were still in 3:3. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Did we do Richard's long speech at the end of 3:3, beginning around line 143 or so? 143. Boy, I don't remember if we did or not. No, we didn't. Okay, we're going to do that quickly because we've got to finish Richard no matter what tonight. Let's back up just a moment. So Richard's been talking with Northumberland. Northumberland leaves to go back to Bolingbroke to tell him what Richard has said. And Northumberland then returns to the king, but he doesn't return immediately to the king's exact presence. He returns to the castle walls. Because remember, the king is inside the walls, and the idea is the king can stay and essentially be hold off for a while against Bolingbroke's forces. And Richard says, what must the king do now? Must he submit? The king shall do it. Must he be deposed? The king shall be contented. Must he lose the name of king? In God's name, let it go. I'll give my jewels for a set of beads. I'll exchange my jewels, crown jewels, for a set of beads. Hippie beads? What's he talking about? What kind of beads? Louder? Prayer beads. Okay? He'll become a pilgrim, he's suggesting. Okay? My gorgeous palace for a hermitage. I'll give up the palace for a small, monastic cell. My gay apparel, the pompous, clothing that he wears, for what? For an almsman's gown. That is a single piece of cloth, rough wool, dark usually in color, rather than the ornate costume he gets to wear as king. My figured goblets for a dish of wood, something made out of wood. My scepter, the royal scepter, for a palmer's walking staff. Palmer, this is a person who begs for alms. Okay? How do they do that? By walking from town to town. My subjects for a pair of carved saints. All right, now keep in mind, Shakespeare's writing this play sometime around 95, 96, but it's set when? 1399 or so. Okay, so it's set 100 years, 150 years, almost 200 years previously, when England is a thoroughly Catholic nation. So by saying he's going to replace, how did you put it? His subjects, for a pair of carved saints, that is entirely within keeping of the period that Richard is set in. If Shakespeare were to write something in the mid-1590s and say, I'm going to replace, X, Y, and Z with a pair of carved saints, he would be going against the spirit of the age, because the spirit of the age was, we don't have carved saints anymore. He's talking about religious statuary, things that you would pray before, okay? Not pray to. So, he says, and my large kingdom for a little grave. A little grave, an obscure grave. I don't know that this is the case, but it's possible that Richard is telegraphing, maybe, what he thinks might be in store for him. Not in the long distant future. Not, 30, 40, 50 years, but maybe 30, 40, 50 hours or a few days. Or I'll be buried in the king's highway, some way of common trade, meaning some place where commoners do their trade of goods, a busy place, in other words, okay? Where subjects' feet may hourly trample on their sovereign's head. Now he's getting a little bit more pointed, because that's what he's saying the subjects will be doing if he is deposed. Omeril, thou weepst, my tender-hearted cousin. Now, who is Omeril again? Duke of York's son. Right? Cousin to the king, cousin to Bolingbroke. Will make foul weather with despised tears. Okay, it's a kind of a Petrarchan conceit. He means our tears, my tears and your tears will what? We will foul the weather. The weather should be good. The sun should be shining. Our sighs and they, the tears, shall lodge the summer corn and make a dearth in this, notice the pun here, in this revolting land. Now, he's talking about the land has become revolting to him. And the land is revolting against him. It kind of, the kingdom kind of makes his stomach turn. But he makes the kingdom's stomach turn. So he's using revolting in two senses. Or shall we play the wantons with our woes, and make some pretty match with shedding tears? And thus to drop them still upon one place, still there meaning always, upon one place, till they have fretted us a pair of graves within the earth. Shall we weep so much that the rush of our tears washes away the soil and digs for us graves? It's a lot of tears. And therein laid, there lies two kinsmen, King and Omeril, two kinsmen digged their graves with weeping eyes. Would not this ill do well? Would not this ill, this wrong, do well? Wouldn't this be a proper and fitting end, he's asking? Well, I see, I talk but idly and you laugh at me. You know, look at that whole speech so far. It's not a soliloquy, right? But he is kind of soliloquizing. Meaning what? Richard's pouring out his heart here, right? And listen to it's poetry. It might not rhyme, but it is poetry. He speaks in poetry. He thinks in poetry. Okay? Compare that with Bolingbroke. So, well, I see I talk but idly and you laugh at me. Most mighty prince, my lord Northumberland. What says King Bolingbroke? Is he king yet? No. What's Richard saying? He will be soon. And he's acting like the king. He has already, mentally deposed me. James?
So who does Shakespeare like in the play? Who is the hero?
That is a great question. And if you read Bevington's introduction, what does he say? Anybody remember? Where Shakespeare's sympathies lie is anybody's guess. It's not entirely clear. It's like when we read Julius Caesar. Okay? A play that too often is unfortunately thrown at high schoolers. Well, high schoolers haven't lived enough to understand Julius Caesar. Frankly, high schoolers haven't lived enough to understand Romeo and Juliet either. Okay? But Julius Caesar, you've got these two great characters, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Which one does Shakespeare favor? Yes. Both of them.
it's so hard in our time period to read a story that doesn't have a hero.
Well, true.
It's weird.
But it's also,
It's interesting. It just takes some getting used to think that way.
But we've also just, man. Okay, you could say in the last 2 years, or you could say in the last 8 years, or you could say in the last 50 years, American society has become hyper partisan. Hyper. My side is the only right side. Back in the 60s, 50s, 60s, you'd hear somebody maybe give a slight
concession.
Yeah, but towards communism. And the other side would say, better dead than red. Okay? My way or the highway. My country, love it or leave it. Kind of thing. Well, that was, relatively minor, and some of that was said tongue-in-cheek. But you jump up to both the Obama administration and the right-wing side's reaction to it. Well, go back a little bit. The second Bush administration, and the left wing's reaction to it, or the Clinton administration and the Nixon. See, it keeps going back and forth. But we've become so hyper-partisan, it's hard to look at the other side and say, there is some good there. There is something positive there. Okay? Shakespeare, bear in mind, writing, first of all, when he writes this, okay, he's got to be subtle. Because, take that back, 1599 is possibly when this was written. He's talking about the deposing of a king. Okay, first of all, the social situation is totally different than ours. Why? We don't have kings. I know some of our leaders think they are kings. Some of our, let me rephrase that, presidents, they're not leaders. They're not leaders. They're presidents. They get elected, they get unelected. Okay? Some of them think they're kings. Some of them think they have the power that goes with a king. They don't. Closest we've had to a president thinking he was a king, I would say, would be FDR. Okay? Because he had 3.5 terms. That's close to being lifetime, but, he died in office. So it was lifetime, essentially, for him once he was elected president. Yeah, well, so was JFK. He only lasted 2.5 years. Okay? So be careful what you wish for in terms of lifetime. Or, the closest we would have to kings, I would say, would maybe be Supreme Court justices. Because they get approved, and guess what? I don't care what your politics are, but you got doddering old, what's her first name? Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she falls asleep half the time during Supreme Court hearings. There's a time in which somebody needs to say, sayonara, I'm going to go off and play with the grandkids or whatever, okay? I don't know who Shakespeare sides with. I think he understands Bolingbroke's position. I think he understands Richard's position. And let me rephrase that. I think, frankly, Shakespeare sides maybe just a little bit more with Richard. Why? This might be my own political leanings. I think Shakespeare is a traditionalist. He brings up in all of his plays, he brings up this idea of tradition that should not be easily disposed of. Okay? You're going to see when we get to King Lear. Lear throws tradition out the window. And what happens as a result? Chaos ensues. Okay? I don't think that means, however, Shakespeare says, tradition is the only way and we should never change anything. He understands the need for some change, and I think that's Bolingbroke's position. Okay? What does Bolingbroke say he's come back for? Give me my land, give me my titles, give me my rights, and we're square. Okay? Now, Northumberland and others, they say we're only here to support Bolingbroke in this, but they kind of imply what else? And maybe if we get a new king in charge, and it's Bolingbroke, he will do what? He'll scratch our backs. So, I mean, if there's one thing Shakespeare is suspect of, it's always the people behind the curtain. It's always the kingmakers, the conspirers. Shakespeare does not like, I don't think, conspiracy. He doesn't like secret plotters. Okay? And that's what Northumberland kind of is here. Well, we're going to see what happens to Northumberland next play, because Bolingbroke kind of turns against him. In other words, you make a king, be careful. That king might bite. So, Richard goes on. Most mighty prince, my lord Northumberland, what says King Bolingbroke? Will his majesty give Richard leave to live till Richard die? Okay, he's already suggested graves. Notice, death is on his mind. Is King Bolingbroke going to let me live to a ripe old age? Why does Shakespeare ask that question? Why does he put those words in Richard's mouth? What problem could that create of having Henry IV allow Richard to live until a natural death?
His claim to the throne isn't as strong.
Okay. Bolingbroke's claim to the throne would be a little bit weakened. You guys are all old enough, but I don't know if you were aware or paid any attention. Who's the current pope? Pope Francis. Who's the previous pope? Benedict the 16th. Did he die?
No.
No. What did Benedict do?
He gave away his position because he couldn't. He was too sick to do his duty.
Yeah, it's kind of what he said. He wasn't. Benedict the 16th gave up the papacy because he said, I'm too old. He was 80. That was how many years ago? How long has Pope Francis been Pope? 3 or 4 years. Benedict's still sucking air, man. And he's not, old. Well, he is old. He's not frail and lying on his deathbed. He still sees people. He still writes. His name before he became Benedict was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, one of the most prolific writers in the College of Cardinals of the Catholic Church. Guy in charge, when he was cardinal, in charge of dogma and doctrine. Okay? He hasn't given that up. So, what a lot of people thought, and I'm not Catholic, but what a lot of people thought was, by him stepping aside, that creates problems for Francis because you have the Pope Emeritus, a new job title. Professors retire, and sometimes they get the title Emeritus. It just means, they served a long time and maybe did a good job. Okay? So you've always got, Francis over here doing what he does, and to a lot of people, he's compared with the living ex-pope. But he's not ex because he's been divorced. He's ex because he gave it up. And there's still some question. What if the ex-pope started doing what? What has George W. Bush started doing in the last year?
Speaking in public.
Speaking in public? How? he was silent for 8 years. He never said one negative word about Obama. Okay? In doing so, he was keeping in tradition with previous presidents, with a couple of exceptions, Clinton and Carter. But all previous presidents, when they stop being president, new president takes over, whoop, zip their lips. Why? His job. I'm not president anymore. They've got to do everything on their own. Well, Bush kept his mouth shut for 8 years. Trump became president, and guess what? The zipper came off. Okay? So that he's made a lot of negative comments. Okay? A lot of people don't like that. They think, if you're going to keep your mouth shut for 8 years, guess what? Keep them shut for another 8 years. Or for the rest of your life. You had your shot. You had your 8 years. Let somebody else do it. Okay? Will Bolingbroke let me die? You make a leg and Bolingbroke says I. Okay? Your gloss. You make a leg. You make an obeisance. And Bolingbroke says, okay. He's kind of suggesting there, I think, if you plant the idea in his mind, he'll go along with it. My lord, in the base court he doth attend to speak with you. May it please you to come down. That is, in the outer or lower court of the castle. Bolingbroke's waiting for you. Will you come down and speak to him? Down, down I come. Notice, Richard thinks in mythological, imagery. Yes, I will come down. I'll come down how? Like the sun coming down to the commoners. He means, I will lay aside my crown. He doesn't actually say that, but that's what he means. Like glistering Phaethon wanting the manage of unruly jades in the base court. Notice, he puns on the word base. He's taking base to mean lowly, common, vulgar. Base court, where kings grow base, to come at traitors' calls. He's just called Bolingbroke a traitor. And do them grace in the base court. Come down. Down court. Down king. Okay? So, Northumberland goes back to Bolingbroke. Bolingbroke. What says? Notice. What says? His Majesty. Bolingbroke doesn't say. What says Richard? His Majesty. He's still, even in private, okay, affording Richard the honor and respect his office deserves. So, Richard comes down. Stand all apart and show fair duty to his Majesty. What does stand all apart mean? I think it means like make a path. Create an opening. Everybody stand aside. Why? Because you're not kingly. You shouldn't, if Kathleen was a king, you shouldn't walk right and get right in his face. You should do that. Step aside and bow. Imagine for a moment if when the president came into the Capitol to deliver the State of the Union, the Sergeant at Arms comes in first and says, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, and the President walks down an aisle. And what are members of Congress usually doing? They are reaching over, reaching their hand out. Doesn't matter who the President is. Doesn't matter which side the member of Congress is on. They want to be seen on the TV reaching out, wanting to shake that President's hand. Even though 5 minutes earlier, they were plotting against that President. Okay? But what if the Sergeant of Arms came in and said, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, all you little peons, out of my way. People would be rightly upset, because that would imply that there's something about this person that is different than everybody else. Well, what is the only thing different about the person? They occupy the office of the president. See, that's the number one, I would argue, that's the number one problem a lot of people have with Donald Trump as president. He doesn't act according to the office that he inhabits. Okay? That's it. He doesn't speak like a president should speak. How does he speak? Okay, like an angry 15-year-old? Not how I was going to put it, but like a builder from the Bronx. Used to dealing with construction workers. Get the hell out of my way. And using other similar much more colorful language. Okay? And, he does this all the time at 3 a.m. Gets on his phone and tweets, etc. So, stand all apart, show fair duty to his majesty. Okay? And he kneels. My gracious Lord. He's saying the king is gracious. Fair cousin, you debase your princely need. 35 minutes, we've done 50 lines. You debase your princely need and make the base earth proud with kissing it. Me rather had my heart might feel your love than my unpleased eye see your courtesy. In other words, get up. This show does nothing to my eye. What would he rather see? I'd rather see your heart kneel than your knee kiss the ground. Your knee kissing the ground means what? Diddly. Nothing. Up, cousin, up. Your heart is up, I know. What does it mean, your heart is up?
You don't respect me.
You don't respect me? What else? Your heart, his passion, is up. He's saying, you want something. You think this should be yours. This high at least. And he touches his crown. This is what your heart is up to. Although your knee be low. Okay, now, I kind of imagine everybody who hears Richard goes, ooh, wow. I mean, how did Bolingbroke address him? Your gracious Lord. Or my gracious Lord. Bolingbroke rising. I come but for mine own. Your own is yours, and I am yours, and all. Richard interprets Bolingbroke as saying, I come but for my own, but he interprets my own as Bolingbroke meaning, it's all mine. I am yours, and everything is yours. So far be mine, my most redoubted Lord, as my true service shall deserve your love. They well deserve to have that know the strongest and surest way to get. They deserve to have, that is to obtain, what? That know how to get what they want. It's kind of like, fate favors the mighty. Okay? York's sitting there weeping. He says, stop. So, 3-4. Enter the queen with two ladies. Actually, no, we'll skip that since we're running late. Go on to... Yeah, still 3-4. The gardener comes in and he's speaking with a man. And the man says, in response to the gardener, line 40, why should we, in the compass of a pail, keep law and form in due proportion, showing as in a model our firm estate, when our sea-walled garden, the whole land, is full of weeds, her fairest flowers choked up? He's saying, why are we paying attention to this garden? Why are we keeping it trimmed? Why are we keeping it manicured, and in order, when the larger garden, of which this little garden is a microcosm, when the larger garden is what? Going to seed. Is falling apart. Why? Because it's not being properly tended and cared for. Her fruit trees, the larger garden, all unpruned, her hedges ruined, her knots disordered, and her wholesome herbs swarming with caterpillars. Caterpillars, rank foul bugs that destroy from within. Gardener, psh, hold thy peace. Okay? And the gardener mentions that some have been plucked up by the root, by Bolingbroke. And he says who? I mean, the Earl of Wiltshire, Bushy, and Green. Are they dead? Because plucked up by the root means they've been removed from life. They are. And Bolingbroke had seized the wasteful king. Notice, wasteful. This is the gardener talking about the king. Oh, what pity is it that he had not so trimmed and dressed his land as we this garden. It's a pity that the king hadn't acted like me, a gardener. Because what does a gardener do? Trimmed and dressed the land. Makes sure things don't get out of hand. That the trees don't just grow wildly, but prunes them. If they're fruit trees, for what purpose? So they will produce fruit. Make sure the grass doesn't overgrow, the boundaries. If the king had done that, then what? Wiltshire, Bushy, and Green would still be alive. We at time of year, what? Do wound the bark, the skin of our fruit trees, lest being overproud and sapping blood, with too much riches it confound itself. Had he done so to great and growing men, they might have lived to bear, and he to taste their fruits of duty. He's talking about Wiltshire, Bushy, and Green. If the king had trimmed them, rather than what? He listened to them. He gave them, full speed ahead kind of orders. He enabled them to do what they were doing already, which was sucking the treasury dry. And not just them, but all those courtiers that he filled the liberal court with. Superfluous branches we lop away. Superfluous, unnecessary, unneeded, not producing fruit. We prune away. Why? That bearing boughs may live. Well, what are the superfluous branches? All those hangers-on at court. What good did they do for the kingdom? What are the superfluous branches in our system? Lobbyists? Some would say the mass of federal employees. Bureaucrats? Who work to do what? To keep the bureaucracy moving. Not to improve the federal government. Not to improve the lives of citizens, etc. Should I go there? Oh, what the hell. 1,000 agents, FBI agents, in the South Florida field offices. 1,000. And none of them were told about Nicholas Cruz. When the FBI headquarters, DC I think, got a telephone call in early January saying, there's this guy who's real crazy about guns and he's been spouting off about killing people. Specifically, a high school. Nobody picked up the phone and made a call to the South Florida FBI. The police in Broward County had been called to his house over 20 times in the last 8 years, including times for his threatening violence against his adoptive family and his neighbors. I mean, brandishing a weapon, that's usually cause enough to be arrested. Nope. Drop the ball. Okay? Yeah. Superfluous. Superfluous people. We lop away. Had he done so, had Richard done so, himself had borne the crown, which waste of idle hours hath quite thrown down. He didn't do the job he was, what? Appointed by God to do. Well, you think the king shall be deposed? Depressed he is already. Notice Shakespeare's use of language. Deposed means removed from office. What does depressed mean? Not the modern mentality. Exactly. Pushed down. Okay? And deposed, 'tis doubt he will be. How dares thy harsh, rude tongue, the queen comes in. She's heard this. How dares thy harsh, rude tongue sound this unpleasing news? What Eve, oh, we're back in the garden. What serpent hath suggested thee to make a second fall of cursed man? Notice, Richard is like unfallen Adam to the queen. Okay? Why dost thou say, Richard, King Richard is deposed? Darest thou little better thing than earth? See, that's the problem with royals, especially in Shakespeare's day. They think others are not at all like them. Well, read Merchant of Venice, because Merchant of Venice has a great, which I've done in this class before, has a great passage where Shylock the Jew is arguing to Antonio, whom he loans money to, and Shylock says, if you cut us, do we not bleed? Because Antonio, the Christian, treats Shylock like something on the sole of his shoe. And Shylock is saying, I'm human just like you are. Well, the analogy is exactly the same. The queen treats the gardener like something on the sole of her shoe. You should not even dare to speak about such as we. Okay? Darest thou little better thing than earth, divine his downfall? Thou little better thing than earth. What is she forgetting? We don't know what time of year this takes place necessarily. But if it begins, let's say, in late winter or early spring, she would be very familiar with the church calendar of Lent. Because how does Lent begin in the Western Church? You have Ash Wednesday. What happens on Ash Wednesday? You go to church, prayers are said, and the priest does what? Marks on your forehead a cross with ashes and says, remember, dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. If you saw Hamlet, okay, and we'll be talking about it when we read it, the gravedigger scene is extremely important. Why? Because that's where Shakespeare kind of says to the entire audience, including James, the king, kings, and the lowest of the low, all end up where? Dirt. They can both be made bungholes of beer casks. Doesn't matter whether you're Alexander the Great or alas, poor York, I knew him, Horatio, a man of infinite jest. She's forgetting that. She thinks she's special. Say where, when, and how camest thou by this ill tidings? Speak, thou wretch. And he says, pardon. Little joy have I to breathe this news, yet what I say is true. King Richard, he is in the mighty hold of Bolingbroke. Not the literal hold, but he means he's in the power of Bolingbroke. Their fortunes both are weighed. Okay? In your Lord's scale is nothing but himself and some few vanities that might make him light. Meaning the scale's going to go up on his side. But in the balance of great Bolingbroke, besides himself are all the English peers. And with that odds, he weighs King Richard down. He has more substance and mass. Post you to London, you'll find it so. I speak no more than everyone does know. You don't believe me? Go to London. You'll see what's happening. 4-1. Bolingbroke calls in Badget. Speak, Badget. Freely thy mind, what thou dost know of noble Gloucester's death. Who wrought it with the king, and who performed the bloody office of his timeless end? Notice what Bolingbroke has just said. Who was involved in Gloucester's death? The king. Right? Who wrought it with the king? Who plotted, conspired, planned it with the king? And who actually performed it? Who actually killed Gloucester? Bring O'Merrill. Bolingbroke says to O'Merrill, cousin, stand forth, look upon that man. O'Merrill comes forth, and Badget says, my lord O'Merrill, I know your daring tongue scorns to unsay what once it hath delivered. In that dead time when Gloucester's death was plotted, I heard you say, is not my arm of length that reaches from the restful English court as far as Calais to mine uncle's head? What does he mean? From here in England, I can reach even so far as Calais. To what? Mine uncle's head. I can have him killed. Amongst much other talk that very time, I heard you say that you had rather refused the offer of 100,000 crowns than Bolingbroke's return to England. O'Merrill disagrees. He disavows what Badget says, throws down his gage. Why? I challenge you, I'm going to defend my honor. There is my gage, the manual seal of death that marks thee out for hell. That's pretty strong language. I say thou liest and will maintain what thou hast said is false in thy heart blood, though being all too base to stain the temper of my knightly sword. That is, you are too base to stain my sword. But I will stain my sword with your blood. Okay? Bolingbroke says, Badget, don't take it up. Leave it there. O'Merrill, excepting one, I would he were the best in all this presence that hath moved me so. So Fitzwater comes in, throws down his gage. And this is the scene where you end up with a pile of gauntlets, lying on the ground. Because you're all just throwing down gages. If that thy valor stand on sympathy, there is my gage, O'Merrill, engage to thine. By that fair sun which shows me where thou standest, and he's talking about that son, not Richard, I heard thee say. Oh, so now what do we have? Two witnesses. Okay? I heard thee say, and vauntingly, boasting, thou spakest it, that thou wert cause of noble Gloucester's death. If thou deniest it 20 times, thou liest, and I will turn thy falsehood to thy heart, where it was forged, with my rapier's point. And O'Merrill takes up that gage. Now, remember, Bolingbroke told Badget, don't pick up O'Merrill's gage. So now O'Merrill picks up Fitzwater's gage. Thou darest not, coward, to live to see that day. So they go back and forth. And then Percy, this is Harry Hotspur, son of Northumberland. He comes in, throws his gage down. O'Merrill, thou liest. His honor is as true, talking about Fitzwater's honor, okay? His honor is as true in this appeal as thou art all unjust. And that thou art so that is unjust, there I throw my gage. Is Percy saying, yeah, I heard it too? No. Percy is standing in as a character witness for Fitzwater. Fitzwater and Badget both say, I heard you say this. Percy's standing back and goes, yeah, and Fitzwater's an honorable man. All right? O'Merrill picks up Hotspur's gage and says, and if I do not, may my hands rot off and never brandish more revengeful steel. Another lord throws down a gage. O'Merrill picks up it. So now he's got 3 gages in his arms. Okay? Fitzwater takes up O'Merrill's gage. Wait, make sure I got that right. Surrey throws down his gauge after he accuses Fitzwater of lying. Fitzwater picks up Surrey's gauge and says, line 79, when he throws down his gauge to Surrey, as I intend to thrive in this new world, that is, what new world?
The one under Bolingbroke.
The kingdom under Bolingbroke's reign. O'Merrill is guilty of my true appeal. Besides, I heard the banished Norfolk. Who's the banished Norfolk? Thomas Mowbray. The one who was banished for what? For conspiring in Gloucester's death and or being responsible for Gloucester's death. That is, having done the deed himself. I heard the banished Norfolk say that thou, O'Merrill, didst send two of thy men to execute the noble Duke at Calais. Which would make Mowbray what? Innocent? O'Merrill, some honest Christian, give me a gauge. Why? He's thrown down both of his. Let me have your gauntlet, Why some honest Christian? Well, because according to O'Merrill, some of these guys aren't honest or Christian, essentially. He borrows a gauge, throws it down. That Norfolk lies, here I do throw down this. If he may be repealed, if his banishment may be repealed, so he can come back to try his honor. Now that's just not fair. He's accusing Mowbray / Norfolk of something that, notice, he's not even around to defend his honor. So he says, bring him back so he can. Bolingbroke. These differences shall all rest under gauge till Norfolk be repealed. That is, none of you are going to have an opportunity to fight each other. All these charges will be in abeyance. They're going to be tabled. Until what time? We can bring Norfolk back from wherever he is, and he can answer what seems to be going on in Bolingbroke's mind. Maybe I was wrong in charging Thomas Mowbray. Okay? Repealed he shall be, and though mine enemy, restored again to all his lands and seigneuries. Bolingbroke is giving us an idea, possibly, of what kind of king he might be. Though he might be personally mine enemy, he will be repealed, he will be unbanished, and he'll get what? Everything that is his restored to him. Unlike what this rotten SOB did to me. He doesn't say that. He doesn't even apply it. But it's hanging in the air. When he is returned against O'Merrill, we will enforce his trial. That is, and when Norfolk arrives, he and O'Merrill will answer to each other. Carlisle. Sorry, king, to be, not king yet. That day shall never be seen. Many a time hath banished Norfolk fought for Jesu Christ in glorious Christian fields, streaming the ensign of the Christian cross against black pagans, Turks, and Saracens, and toiled with works of war, retired himself to Italy. That is, he went off, he fought the pagans, and having fought the pagans, he's retired to Italy. And there at Venice gave his body to that pleasant country's earth, and his pure soul unto his captain Christ. And he died of a ripe old age. Under whose colors, Christ's, he had fought so long. He died a good Christian knight, in other words. Bolingbroke, what? Dead? As surely as I live. Sweet peace conduct his sweet soul to the bosom of good old Abraham. Notice that language. He just said, and even though he's my enemy, now what has he done?
Bless his soul in heaven.
That's essentially forgiving him. Okay? Lord's appellants, that is, those who are appealing. lords who appear as formal accusers. Your differences shall all rest under gauge till we assign you to your days of trial. It's kind of his way of saying, damn, I can't bring Norfolk back from the dead, so you guys are all going to have to fight each other. And I'll tell you when. All right? York then speaks when he comes in. Great Duke of Lancaster, I come to thee from plume-plucked Richard. Plume-plucked. The plumes, like horses' tail or feathers in a crown. Plucked meaning he's lost his honors, he's lost his glories. Who with willing soul adopts the heir. He's making you heir, Henry. Meaning, you're next in line. Well, we find out at the beginning of the next play, there's somebody who's actually closer in line than Henry Bolingbroke. It's the Earl Mortimer. Okay? Who with willing soul adopts the heir, and his high scepter yields to the possession of thy royal hand. Ascend his throne, descending now from him. Ascend, rise up, his throne, which now, notice, descends from him. There's an implication there that the throne, because it is now descending, is what? It's becoming less. And long live Henry, fourth of that name. In God's name, I'll ascend the regal throne. This is the first time Henry suggests anything like this. Notice, it is offered to him. He doesn't say, will Richard give me the crown? Okay? Richard, through York, does that. Carla, God forbid. Would God that any in this noble presence were enough noble to be upright judge of noble Richard. Notice, noble, noble, noble. Would God that any in this noble presence, presence of nobles, were enough noble, had enough nobility to do what? To be upright judge of noble, honored Richard. Then true noblesse, noblesse oblige, the honor of knighthood, chivalry and such, would learn him forbearance from so foul a wrong. Right behavior. You can't do this, he's saying. What subject can give sentence on his king? And who sits here that is not Richard's subject? Passive obedience. What subject can say the king should not be king? Nobody can. And show the figure of God's majesty. The figure of God's majesty. That's what? That's the king. His captain, steward, deputy elect, anointed, crowned, planted many years. No, he's emphasizing an idea there. Should that one be judged by subject and inferior breath, and he himself not present? Where is Richard? Has he been standing beside Bolingbroke all this time? Or just behind him? No, he's not on the stage. Oh, forfeited God, that in a Christian climate, souls refined should show so heinous, black, obscene a deed. Come on, guys. We're all supposed to be Christians here, and we're acting, he suggests, unchristianly. I speak to subjects, and a subject speaks, stirred up by God thus boldly for his king. My lord of Hereford here, whom you call king, is a foul traitor to proud Hereford's king. Now, Hereford there, the second time, I think refers to the duchy, not the person. Okay? My lord of, and if you crown him, if you make him king, let me prophesy. The blood of English shall manure the ground, and future ages groan for this foul act. Yep, that's exactly what's going to happen. Okay? Because we're going to finish the play, and Henry's going to say, let's go make amends by killing pagans in Jerusalem. Go to the Holy Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And then he's going to find out, you can't. Why? Because some of the nobles and barons are opening civil war against you. And he's like, oh, man. Here I thought we were done with all that. Here I thought by deposing the old king, my traitorous self becoming king, stopped all traitorous selves. So, Carlyle goes on. If you crown him, let me prophesy. The blood of English shall manure the ground, and future ages groan for this foul act. Peace shall go sleep with Turks and infidels. And in this seat of peace, tumultuous wars shall kin with kin and kind with kind confound. Brother against brother, family against family. Disorder, horror, fear, and mutiny shall here inhabit. And this land be called the field of Golgotha and dead men's skulls. Golgotha, the place of the skull. There's going to be so many dead Englishmen, he is suggesting. Oh, if you raise this house, and he points to Bolingbroke, I think, against this house, and he points to where Richard is, it will the woefulest division prove that ever fell upon this cursed earth. Prevent it, resist it, let it not be so, lest child's children cry against you. Woe. Woe. Like Jesus' famous 7 woes to the scribes and Pharisees. Northumberland. Well have you argued, sir, and for your pains of capital treason, we arrest you here. Capital. What's that mean? Against the head. Capital punishment is what? Against the head. You get your head lopped off. Okay? So, Bolingbroke says, bring in Richard. Why? So that in common view, he may surrender. Common view. In view of the commons. See, we have the English peerage, the nobility here, but what else? Bolingbroke's had this huge following of commoners. Let them see him surrender. So we shall proceed without suspicion. Well, that part's debatable. I mean, they might say, Henry's got thousands of men. Bolingbroke's got a few score. One could be a little suspicious of that. So Richard comes out. Why am I sent for to a king, before I have shook off the regal thoughts wherewith I reigned? That is, you got to give me time to do what? To think not like a king. I mean, think of this from our modern perspective. What must it be like on January 21st of the year following an election? And you're not reelected. You're president. What must it have been like on January 21st of 2017 for Barack Obama to no longer be president?
Thank goodness I'm out.
Yeah, I mean, you what? You no longer have to take care of the presidential daily brief. You no longer have to think of, all the crap that's happening. It's not your problem anymore. The only difference is, in our system as opposed to this system, what kind of perks will Richard get? There's none. What kind of perks does any former president get? Secret Service protection for life. Okay, for one thing.
They're not going to be hurting for money.
They're not going to be hurting for money. I mean, doors are opened, both literal and figuratively. You have everything. It's like having the job of president without the responsibilities. Okay? So, he says, let me wrap my mind around this a bit. I hardly yet have learned to insinuate, to flatter, bow, and bend my knee. To insinuate, to imply without directly saying. Give sorrow leave a while to tutor me to this submission. Yet I will remember the favors of these men. Were they not mine? Did they not sometimes cry, all hail, to me? So Judas did to Christ. See, it's comments like that that make you very aware Richard can't live long. Because he's going to let slip things like that every now and then. Oh, hi, Judas. King. But he in 12 found truth in all but one, Christ. I in 12,000, none. God save the king. Will no man say, amen? Because who's the king right now? Yay, me. Am I both priest and clerk? Well then, amen. That is, do I have to say my own amen? Okay, I'll do it. God save the king, although I be not he. And yet, amen, if heaven do think him me. You can take the crown off my head, Richard just said. But guess what? In heaven's eye, I'm still king. To do what service am I sent forth thither? York, to do that office of thine own goodwill, which tired majesty did make thee offer. The resignation of thy state and crown to Henry Bolingbroke, he says, give me the crown. Takes the crown. Here, cousin, seize the crown. Notice, he doesn't say, here, cousin, take, seize. Usurp. Now, on this side, my hand, and on that side, thine. That is, I've got it here, you've got it here, now take. Now is this golden crown like a deep well that owes two buckets, filling one another. The emptier ever dancing in the air, the other down and seen and full of water. That bucket down and full of tears am I, drinking my griefs while you mount up high. Boy, I thought you were willing to resign. My crown, yes. My griefs, those are mine. I can't give you those. Bolingbroke, part of your cares you give me with your crown. Part of your cares, some of your cares you give me with your crown. He can also mean, however, the parting of your cares. Give me the crown. You no longer have any cares. Richard, your cares set up do not pluck my cares down. That is, yes, you will have new cares once you take the crown. That doesn't reduce mine, however. My care is what? Loss of care. Loss of duty. By old care done. Your care is gain of care by new care won. The cares I give I have, though given away. They tend the crown, yet still with me they stay. Are you contented to resign the crown? No, I. Yes, no, no, yes. For I must nothing be. If he gives away the crown, what is he? He's saying, I'm nothing. Why? Because I was born to be king. Therefore, no, for I resign to thee. Now mark me how I will undo myself. And he yields the crown and scepter. I give this heavy weight from off my head, and this unwieldy scepter from my hand. The pride of kingly sway from out my heart. With mine own tears I wash away my balm. With mine own hands I give away my crown. With mine own tongue deny my sacred state. Deny. With mine own breath release all duteous oaths, all pomp and majesty I do forswear. My manors, rents, revenues I forego, which he kind of already did by renting them out to everybody. My acts, decrees, and statutes I deny. God pardons all oaths that are broke to me. All of you knights who have sworn oaths of fealty to me, God pardon you. God keep all vows, unbroke, are made to thee. Make me that nothing have and nothing grieved, and thou withal pleased, thou hast all achieved. Long mayst thou live in Richard's seat to sit, and soon lie Richard in an earthly pit. He knows what's coming. Okay? So Northumberland gives him a paper. It says, read this. That is, read it publicly. These accusations, these grievous crimes committed by your person, and by confessing them the souls of men may deem that you are worthily deposed. That is, if you admit to all of these wrongs, then everybody will say, yeah, he should be deposed. What does this imply? No man is what? Above the law. That's what it implies. The law stands higher even than the king. Richard, would you like me to make you read your offenses publicly? He said, no, I don't want to do this. Come on, read. He says a bunch of stuff. My Lord, no Lord of thine, thou hot insulting man, nor no man's Lord. I have no name, no title. No, not that name was given me at the font, but 'tis usurped. Alack, every day that I've worn so many winters out. Da-da-da-da-da. Okay? So, Richard says, 270-something, 4, I'll read enough when I do see the very book indeed where all my sins are writ, and that's myself. Bring me a mirror. So they bring him a mirror. Okay? And he looks in it, and he goes, no deeper wrinkles yet. Has sorrow struck, etc., etc. And he shatters the mirror. There it is, cracked in 100 shivers. Mark, silent king, the moral of this sport. How soon my sorrow hath destroyed my face. Bolingbroke, the shadow of your sorrow hath destroyed the shadow of your face. He goes, that's pretty funny. They keep talking. And Richard asks for one thing. Bolingbroke, ask. 3:10, 3:11. And shall I have? That is, if I ask, are you going to give it to me? You're not going to make me ask and then deny me, right? He goes, you shall. Give me leave to go. Whither? Whither you will, so I were from your sight. Wherever you want, as long as I'm not in your sight. As long as I don't have to see you. Go, some of you, convey him to the Tower. Tower of London. Not an auspicious sign. Okay? That's usually where traitors and criminals, etc., are taken to disappear. Okay? And in an Elizabethan audience, what they would hear, take him to the Tower, they've got all kinds of fresh ideas in mind. Okay? Some of whom would have still been alive when Henry VIII was king. And remembered little things like when Lady Jane Grey was taken to the Tower. Or Anne Boleyn was taken to the Tower. And didn't come out. Richard, oh good, convey. Conveyors are you all, that rise thus nimbly by a true king's fall. What does he mean, conveyors are you all?
You're all responsible for this.
You're all responsible for this. What else? Louder?
Everyone's escorting him to his death.
Okay, so what is that really? They're what? They're like, wagon drivers. You guys are nothing but taxi cabs. He's lowering what all these dukes and nobles are. You are mere what? Escorters to death. Okay? Let's see here. 5-1, the queen comes in, talks with Richard. She's kind of like, come on, Richard, rise up. Show your glory. And he's, no, not anymore. Northumberland comes in, line 55 or so, and Richard addresses him. Because Northumberland says, my lord, the mind of Bolingbroke has changed. You must to Pomfret, not unto the Tower, madam. There's order ta'en for you with all swift speed. You're going to France. He's going to Pomfret, which is the west of England. And Richard says, Northumberland, their ladder wherewithal the mounting Bolingbroke ascends my throne. The time shall not be many hours of age, more than it is frail sin. Gathering heads shall break into corruption. Thou shalt think. Though he divide the realm and give thee half, it is too little. Time's going to come, Northumberland, when what? You're going to want more. And he's not going to give it. He give thee half, it is too little, helping him to all. He shall think that thou, which knowest the way to plant unrightful kings, wilt know again, being there so little urged another way, to pluck him headlong from the usurped throne. The love of wicked men converts to fear, that fear to hate, and hate turns one or both to worthy danger and deserved death. He's saying, because you are a traitor to me, what is Henry Bolingbroke going to think in a few hours and or days? That you will also turn traitor to him.
Wasn't Northumberland one of the ones that didn't want Bolingbroke to become king in the first place? He just wanted him he was just helping him to get his.
They all were.
He was one of the people.
They all said, we're just helping him get his lands and titles back. Remember, Bolingbroke, Northumberland is the one who made the speech. And if anyone break this oath, what was the oath? To help Bolingbroke get his titles back and to serve the true king. If anyone breaks this oath, the question is, which is this oath? Is it the one to get Bolingbroke his honors back, or is it the one to serve the rightful king? That person, he says, will go against God and such.
But isn't he also technically breaking that oath as well?
Yeah. Yeah, he already has, because he did what? He helped depose the king. Middle Ages, you can't depose a king. I mean, Richard was the first quote-unquote king deposed. Who's the first king executed? Charles I. Right? 1649, Parliament passes a law that Charles has violated his kingly authority. And they do what? They have him arrested. This is after the Puritan civil wars between what are called the Cavaliers, those in support of the government and the king, and the Puritans, or also called the Roundheads. And Charles has been kind of reigning in exile, like in Oxford, for a while. Okay? He's captured in the wars. He's taken to London. He's tried, and he's publicly executed. Has his head chopped off. And then you have a period for 11 years called the interregnum. Between regnum, kings. It's when the Commonwealth comes into being. Right? And Oliver Cromwell rules for most of that as the Lord Protector of the Commonwealth. Lord Protector is just a longer form of king. He would never let himself be addressed as king, but he had all the rights and privileges of the king. In fact, when he died, guess what? His eldest son became Lord Protector after him. Right? But then he gave up the Lord Protectorate in 1660 when you get what's called the Restoration. It's the restoration of the monarchy. It's the restoration of the House of Stuart. Charles II becomes king. Charles I, Charles II. Charles I is the son of James. Charles II is the son of Charles I. Okay? So, he says, careful, Northumberland. He's going to suspect you. My guilt be on my head, and there an end. Well, we could almost skip from there to just a couple pages into Henry VI, where Northumberland addresses now Henry IV and says, oh, we helped you to this, and here you're not giving us our fair due and stuff, showing us our honors. Right? So, jump to 5:2. Let's see here. The Duchess talks to Gloucester, and she asks, where rode Richard II? As Bolingbroke was, brought in and such. Bolingbroke, was mounted on a steed and the people are praising him. Where was Richard during this? Line 23. As in a theater, the eyes of men, after a well-graced actor leaves the stage, okay, Shakespeare's kind of breaking the fourth wall here, are idly bent on him that enters next, thinking his prattle to be tedious. So, the people's eyes were on Bolingbroke, and Richard's in the back. So, what's the analogy mean? As in a theater, the eyes of men, after a well-graced actor leaves the stage, are idly bent on him that enters next, thinking his prattle to be tedious. Even so, with much more contempt, men's eyes did scowl on gentle Richard. Gentle Richard is like the lesser-known, not as good actor.
Were plays and such common during that time period? I know they were 200 years later.
Richard's time period?
Yes.
No.
So the analogy doesn't really fit the time.
Right. No, it doesn't. It's entirely anachronistic.
That
I mean,
bothered me.
yeah. I mean, you don't have the stage per se. The kind of plays that would occur around 1400, a little bit before that, is you had the medieval guilds put on productions of plays. Largely morality plays, mystery plays, plays on religious themes and such. And those would occur on top of wagon platforms. And they would occur at certain festivals of the year. Corpus Christi Day, things like that. And each guild would put on a different kind of play. And there would be awards for who had the best play and things like that. But no, there were no playhouses at all. You don't get the first playhouse in England until essentially 1575 with the theater, 1576. Okay? So, they scowled at Richard. No man cried, God save him. No joyful tongue gave him his welcome home. But what? People threw dirt at him. Dust was thrown upon his sacred head, with which such gentle sorrow he shook off, his face still combating with tears and smiles the badges of his grief and patience, that had not God for some strong purpose steeled the hearts of men, they must perforce have melted, and barbarism itself had pitied him. How does Richard take people throwing dust on him? Does he go, you're going to pay for that? God's going to get you. No. He bears it patiently and humbly. This is, the transformation of Richard from being a haughty, arrogant, narcissistic fool in most of the play to being what? Someone who has learned Hamlet's slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. He has learned what tragic heroes all learn. Shouldn't be full of myself. Operate with a little humility. Okay? York finds 69 and following the letter from O'Merrill, okay, plotting against Henry IV. And York's wife begs him not to turn him in. And York says, we got to go to Oxford, where the king is, 5-3. Our first mention of Prince Hal. Can no man tell me of my unthrifty son? 'Tis full 3 months since I did see him last. If any plague hang over us, 'tis he. I would to God, my lords, he might be found. Inquire at London, go to London. Where? Go to the palaces? Yeah, go to the taverns and bars and whorehouses. We'll inquire at London amongst the taverns there, for there they say, he daily doth frequent with unrestrained loose companions, even such they say as stand in narrow lanes and beat our watch. That is, beat the cops. The watch is the night watch. These are guys who sneak up on the night watch and beat them and do what? Rob our passengers, highway robbers. While he, young, wanton, and effeminate boy, okay, wanton, pampered youth, effeminate, self-indulgent. He gives into all of his desires. Takes on the point of honor to support so dissolute a crew. Okay? That's our first answer. Percy says, I saw the prince some 2 days ago. Told him of the triumphs at Oxford. And what said he? His answer was he would unto the stews, the whorehouses, and from the commonest creature pluck a glove. Commonest, most promiscuous, and wear it as a favor, and with that he would unhorse the lustiest challenger. As dissolute as desperate. Yet both through both I see some sparks of better hope, which elder years may happily bring forth. That is, he's dissolute, he's desperate, but the king says, and yet in those, maybe some good will come in later years. So, let's just jump to the end. What happens to Richard?
Murdered.
How so?
How so?
King Henry is drunk and saying how it would be better if Richard was dead, and then
Exon kills him.
Florence and brings his body to the king.
Yeah, I'm trying
I
to.
thought you wanted me to do this because he said so, and you were drunk.
Exon says, where is it? The exact words, 5:4. Didst thou not mark the king what words he spake? Have I no friend will rid me of this living fear? Was it not so? So Exon does. What does the king say in response to Exon? Can a man not wish something but not really want it to happen? Can he not say something but not really mean it? And I think Shakespeare has in mind with this Henry II. Okay, 1154 and 1189 is when he was king. Henry II, good friends with Thomas, okay, Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas à Becket. And Richard, Henry apparently said one time in a drunken stupor, according to anecdotal evidence, will no man rid me of this meddlesome priest? He says that in a Crispin drunken, stupor. And 3 nights ride from London to Canterbury, and on December 29th, or 28th, can't remember the exact date, 1186, something like that, they assassinate Thomas à Becket at the altar of the cathedral. Okay? I think Shakespeare uses that line, kind of, with Richard. Notice the way Shakespeare portrays it, and I know we're just a minute or so over. Does Bolingbroke really want Richard executed? No. Notice the way Shakespeare puts it, though. He kind of what? Has it both ways. Richard is assassinated, but Bolingbroke now has what? Plausible deniability. Okay. All right. Henry II, first part, Henry IV for Thursday.
Papers.
Yeah, turn in your papers too.